RUSI New South Wales is an independent, apolitical, not-for-profit public education institute that, since 1888, has been promoting informed debate on and enhancing public awareness and understanding of defence and national security issues. We are Australia's oldest think tank. We conduct monthly lectures and seminars, issue a monthly newsletter, provide research support through our extensive military and historical library located in the Anzac Memorial in Sydney's Hyde Park, and together with RUSI Australia, publish a national quarterly magazine called United Service, with informed articles addressing the latest defence and security issues.
Please note, this monthly update presents the geostrategic situation as at the 10th of March, 2025. As often with these rapidly changing events, the monthly update can be out of date by the time the podcast is released. Current geostrategic issues.
Geostrategic friends. Sadly, our friend David Leese is unavailable. So John Howells has stood in as editor, and to give some gravitas a gestalt of contributions by the RUSI NSW Special Interest Group on strategy and other sources have been used.
Australia. This month we witnessed the circumnavigation of the continent by a small Chinese flotilla, who did or did not fire weapons as part of an exercise. People's Liberation Army Navy Task Group 107 comprised the Jiangkai-class frigate Hengyang, the Renhai-class cruiser Junyi, and the Fuji-class replenishment vessel Waishanhu, possibly accompanied by a nuclear submarine. Australian Navy ships HMAS Warramunga, HMAS Stuart, and HMAS Toowoomba shadowed the Chinese task group. As they passed close to New Zealand, HMNZS Te Kaha joined in the shadow. The Chinese vessels conducted live-fire drills in the Tasman Sea off the shores of Australian and New Zealand waters on the 20th and the 21st of February 2025. A display that demonstrated to both nations that passage in international waters can place a state actor with deadly force very close to Australian and New Zealand population centres. Finished with their fun in the east, the group then headed west to stir reaction in Western Australia, sailing past Perth and the HMAS Stirling submarine base. At least no further live fires. It would appear that what can be said by informed politicians, Australia knew about the jaunt in advance, though not about the timing of the live firing. There the Chinese were careful to give the minimum legal advice. The visit was, it would appear, timed to occur as the new administration in the USA was finding its feet and an Australian election looms. Our politicians did take the bait a bit too much, and US attempts at peace in our time did raise questions about our major allies' approach should the threat have been more than it was. USA. There has been a great deal of change in the USA following the inauguration of Donald Trump as president in late January. The flurry of executive orders, however, are apart from making the stock exchanges of the world jump, are yet to have an impact. The tariffs that were to apply to Canada, Mexico and China from the 11th of March, 2025, and have now been delayed are at present the major antipodal concern. China is our major trading partner, and Canada, faced with its US energy market dwindling, will sell elsewhere. Australia is unlikely to benefit. As for the threatened worldwide tariffs on steel and aluminium, let us trust that our government and diplomats can get us the best result. On trade we subsidize the USA, and we contribute to the US nuclear submarine industry. The incident that shocked us all occurred on Friday, the 28th of February, 2025. A meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, US President Donald Trump, and US Vice President James Vance. It was available as a full video for all to see. To the non-rusted-on Trump supporters it appeared to be at the level of a schoolyard scrap. Two bullies laying into the boy who did not fit. Repeating the 1938 argument that Ukraine was suppressing the Sudeten Russians, and this justified invasion, the bullies struck with a viciousness that amazed. The bullied, however, did not cower. He stood up for his nation, people and their struggle. And just like a bullied schoolboy who stands up against his assailants, was blamed for his stance. Vital assistance the Ukrainian people need was paused. Ukraine's offer to sign away the mineral rights that could work to secure its economic future in gratitude for U.S. assistance in the past and future was lost in the futility of the incident. We do not yet know where this will lead. Zelensky has done a great deal of groveling since, and Trump could be just engaged in the kind of vicious dealing he is accustomed to in business. He could just be making an opening gambit. March may tell how the peace process develops. In a further sign of the new U.S. administration's approach to Russia and its place in the world, the U.S. State Department Deputy Assistant Secretary for International Cybersecurity Liesl Franz said during a speech in a United Nations working group last week that the U.S. is concerned about digital attacks from China and Iran, but did not mention Russia. A recent memo distributed at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency laid out priorities for the agency, focusing on China and defensive U.S. systems, but omitted any reference to Russia. And the cybersecurity news outlet The Record reported that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth ordered U.S. Cyber Command to stop all cyber operational planning against Russia, including offensive digital campaigns. Australia stands with Ukraine, as does most of Europe. Russo-Ukraine War. In the month of February, Russia seized just under 200 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. This is significantly less than what they have achieved in the preceding months. There are multiple possible explanations for this. The Ukrainians, despite their manpower shortages, continue to learn and adapt to Russian tactics on the ground. Drones have been a major part of this, but drones are just part of an integrated combined arms approach to defending ground, which also includes infantry, mines, indirect fires, air defenses, EW, counterattacks, and deep strikes on Russian logistics and command nodes. The weather was slightly warmer this year in some areas, and the ground did not freeze uniformly. This made cross-country mobility more difficult for those conducting offensive operations. As the Kiev Independent reports, the Central Geophysical Observatory declared 2024 the warmest year on record in Kiev, with the December average at 0 degrees Celsius. Weather is always a factor in military operations, and it appears it may have had an impact on Russian operations. And, of course, if there are fewer winter storms, there is more time for drones to get into the sky and hunt Russians. While there have been huge losses of Russian equipment in the past 3 years, personnel losses have racked up significantly in the past few months. The Russians still have an asymmetry over Ukraine in this regard, but as the graph from the IISS shows, the huge losses in Russian personnel in the second half of 2024 has seen an overall decline in the size of the Russian force deployed in Ukraine. This will inevitably force tougher choices on Russian commanders about the tempo of offensive operations. Finally, it is possible that the Russian Eastern Offensive, begun nearly 15 months ago in the wake of the failed Ukrainian 2023 offensive, may be showing signs that it is culminating. We are not ready to take a call on this just yet, however. The Russians clearly retain significant offensive potential. So, while they may not culminate, the tempo of their offensive operations for next few months may continue to decline. On the front line, Ukrainian soldiers continue to fight and hold their positions as much as possible. That said, Russia has made minor gains on the ground in the past week. The events in the White House on the 28th of February indicate that there will be no quick resolution to the war, and thus, fighting on the ground and in the air will continue. Indeed, it is very likely that Russia and Ukraine will attempt to step up attacks to seize the narrative on progress in the war. Both Ukrainian and Russian forces have conducted multiple ground attacks in the past week in Kursk in the past. The Russians have managed to make small, but operationally insignificant, gains in territory over the past week, and the Ukrainians have also conducted counterattacks, which have yielded small amounts of ground. Ukraine is steadily losing ground in Kursk. It will need to arrest these losses, particularly in the southern elements of the salient, to ensure that Russia is not able to threaten an envelopment of Ukrainian forces there. Should Russia achieve such a situation, it will place the security of the entire Ukrainian salient in Kursk at risk, and deprive Ukraine of one element of its war termination negotiation strategy. Russian operations to the west of the Ukrainian salient, north of Sumy, are clearly designed to place Ukrainian forces in a dilemma and force them to redeploy forces, be they local reserves designed to respond to Russian attacks in Kursk or from elsewhere, to defend.
Russia in the last week of February made small advances on the following axes: Kharkiv, Lyman, Toretsk, Kupiansk, Pakrovsk, Siversk.
Ukraine has conducted counterattacks in several regions during the week and made small gains, or regained lost ground in the following areas: Kupiansk, Toretsk, Pokrovsk, Novopavlivka, Orikhiv. Russian operations to envelop Pokrovsk continue, however. The rate of advance by Russian forces has slowed. Further north, however, the Russians appear to be making a major push over the Oskil River, and their operations in this area bear closer scrutiny. Ukrainian long-range strike activity included the following. The 24th of February, a strike on the Ryazan oil refinery in Ryazan Oblast, causing a fire in the area of the primary oil processing unit. A fuel depot in the Tula Oblast of Russia was also struck. Forced tougher choices on Russian commanders about the tempo of offensive operations. The 26th of February, Ukraine hit targets in Krasnodar Krai, including the Tuapse seaport. Strikes were executed against targets in Jankoy, Kerch, and Sevastopol. Russia has continued its drone and missile attacks against targets in Ukraine, including multiple strikes against civilian targets. In the last week of February, Ukrainian intelligence chief General Budanov discussed Russia's recruiting targets for the next year. He stated that the targets would be 100,000 lower than last year. This could indicate a few different things. First, it could mean that Putin expects to wrap up his special military operation in the coming year, and that he can begin a small-scale winding down of the war effort as a result. Next, it could mean that Russia can't sustain its current levels of recruiting, and is therefore lowering its targets so that it does not risk a narrative of recruiting shortfalls. It could also mean that Russia could be considering another mobilization, but I think this is a very low probability. Finally, the North Koreans have reportedly deployed more troops to Kursk. South Korean news has reported that North Korea deployed between 1,000 and 3,000 more troops to Kursk in January and February 2025. Ukraine's head of intelligence, Lieutenant General Budanov, has stated that North Korean forces are gaining useful experience in modern warfare, particularly in drone warfare, and enhancing their weapons systems while fighting in Kursk. He noted that North Korean KN-23 ballistic missiles been modernized by the Russians to improve their accuracy. Not only is North Korean learning and adaptation a problem in the Ukraine war, it will be a challenge for South Korean forces on the Korean peninsula. Gaza. February saw Donald Trump take a property developer's approach to this potential piece of coastal paradise. The climate is great, water and energy are a difficulty, however, with plenty of sunshine for solar electricity and advanced desalination technology, the possibilities are endless. A potential paradise. The people, well, just as you would redevelop a disadvantaged neighborhood, move them out. Just set up suitable accommodation, the odd tent and portaloo in nearby countries. Then should the displaced have the millions to invest in the new paradise on the Mediterranean, they could move back. Nero tried the same thing, cleaning out the treasures and destroying the temple in Jerusalem to fund the extravagant rebuild of Rome after the fire, and distributing the militant population to the ends of the known world. He even changed the name of the place from Judea to Palestine, commemorating the Philistines, the Israelites' sworn enemy. Could be just a pie-in-the-sky public musing. Then again, Donald has been known to take his musing seriously. It is interesting to contemplate Trump area, the renamed Gaza populated by the world's glitterati arising alongside the cross-border camps of the former now impoverished inhabitants. Egypt has offered an alternative. Under this plan, Gaza's Palestinian population would not be forced to leave the territory. A 6-month interim period would require a committee of Palestinian technocrats, operating under the management of the Palestinian Authority, to clear the rubble from Salah al-Din Street, which is the main north-south highway in the Gaza Strip. Once the roads are clear, 200,000 temporary housing units would be built to accommodate 1.2 million people, and about 60,000 damaged buildings restored. According to the blueprint, longer-term reconstruction requires an additional 4 to 5 years after the interim measures are completed. Over that span, the plan aims to build at least 400,000 permanent homes, as well as rebuilding Gaza's seaport and international airport. Gradually, basic provisions such as water, a waste system, telecommunication services and electricity would also be restored. The plan further calls for the establishment of a steering and management council, which would be a financial fund supporting the interim governing body in Gaza. A group of independent Palestinian technocrats to manage affairs in Gaza, in effect replacing Hamas. The technocratic government would be responsible for overseeing humanitarian aid and would pave the way for the Palestinian Authority to administer Gaza. President Mahmoud Abbas of the Palestinian Authority said that an election could take place next year if circumstances allowed. On the security front, Egypt and Jordan have both pledged to train Palestinian police officers and deploy them to Gaza. The two countries have also called on the United Nations Security Council to consider authorizing a peacekeeping mission to oversee governance in Gaza until reconstruction is complete. Egypt is calling for US 53 billion to fund the reconstruction of Gaza, with the money distributed over 3 phases. In the first 6-month phase it would cost US 3 billion to clear rubble from Salah al-Din Street, construct temporary housing and restore partially damaged homes. The second phase would take 2 years and cost US 20 billion. The work of rubble removal would continue in this phase, as well as the establishment of utility networks and the building of more housing units. Phase 3 would cost US 30 billion and take 2.5 years. It would include completing housing for Gaza's whole population, establishing the first phase of an industrial zone, building fishing and commercial ports, and building an airport, among other services. According to the plan, the money will be sourced from a variety of international sources including the UN and international financial organizations, as well as foreign and private sector investments. There are still a number of variables that could complicate the plan. Perhaps most importantly, it is unclear whether Hamas, Israel or the US will agree to it. Hamas welcomed the reconstruction plan and has previously agreed to a technocratic government. But it is less clear if it will accept the return of the Palestinian Authority, which itself would face the perception from its critics that it has returned to Gaza on the back of Israel's tanks. Hamas may be willing to discuss its removal from governance, but is adamantly against its disarmament, something the Egyptian plan adopted by the Arab League did not discuss. Israel has made it clear that this is a red line, and that Hamas will not be allowed to keep its weapons. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has also said that he will not allow the Palestinian Authority to return to Gaza. There is also the question of whether Trump will abandon his idea of a US-controlled Middle East Riviera for the Egyptian plan. It is difficult to predict what Trump's position will be, particularly if Israel signals its opposition to the Egyptian plan. Israel said that Arab states needed to break free from past constraints and collaborate to create a future of stability and security in the region. And Israel continues to back Trump's Gaza displacement plan, which echoes a long-standing call from the Israeli far-right to depopulate Gaza. West Bank. Just meters from the last houses in Bard Allah, a Palestinian village at the northern end of the occupied West Bank, Israel's army has bulldozed a dirt road and ditch between the community and open grazing land on the hills behind it. Israel's military say the works were for security, and to allow it to patrol the area following the killing of an Israeli civilian in August near the village by a man from another town. Farmers from the fertile Jordan Valley village fear the army patrols and Israeli settlers moving in will exclude them from pastures that feed around 10,000 sheep and goats, as has happened in other parts of the West Bank, undercutting their livelihoods and eventually driving them from the village. Israeli settler outposts have appeared around the village since last year, with clusters of blue and white Israeli flags newly fluttering from nearby hilltops. The settlers intimidated semi-nomadic Bedouin shepherds to abandon their camps in the area last year. Over recent weeks, caravans and shelters have begun appearing on the scrub-covered hills a few hundred meters west of Bard Allah, on land behind the new track. Temporary shelters have been constructed and there are the first signs of new outposts being built. Bard Allah, with a population of about 3,000, has prospered quietly over the past 30 years as Israel's settlement movement swallowed up thousands of hectares of land in other parts of the West Bank. The cornfields and clusters of plastic-sheeted greenhouses where its farmers grow eggplants, peppers and zucchini for the markets of the West Bank and Israel underscore how fertile the land is in the narrow strip of valley alongside the Jordan River, running from the Dead Sea north towards the Sea of Galilee. The new Israeli-controlled path will squeeze the village against Highway 90, a road that runs north-south along the riverine border with Jordan from the Dead Sea. Highway 90 ends at the separating line between the West Bank and Israel, just outside the village. The separating line is marked by a high fence. Citing the experience of other villages, Dror Etkes, founder of Israeli rights group Kerem Navat, said the new track and settlement activity would block access for Palestinians to the area north of Bard Allah, all the way up to the separation barrier. Kerem Navat tracks Israeli settlement and land management policy in the West Bank. The West Bank, so named because of its relation to the river that separates it from Jordan, has long been seen by religious nationalist hardliners in Israel as part of a greater Israel through historical and biblical connections to the Jewish people. Jewish settlement building has roared ahead under Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and allies in government such as hardline Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, himself a settler, who said last year he would push to gain Washington's support for annexation in 2025. The Pacific. The lead news from the Pacific this week is the snap Chinese exercise around Taiwan. While this might be entirely coincidental with the timing of the Oval Office blow-up, overall the Chinese have been stepping up the aggression throughout the Pacific in a test of America's commitment to the region and its allies and security partners. This was inevitable given the comments of Trump before his election about allies in Europe and Asia needing to pay more for the U.S. alliance system. The remarks by U.S. administration officials at and around the Munich Security Conference will certainly have provoked the Chinese into action. Increasingly, these Chinese naval operations are being executed with no warning, which is telegraphing that eventually, the Chinese exercises might shift instantly from exercise to real operations against Taiwan. It indicates a degree of readiness in Chinese forces, and that the Joint Theater Commands are testing an array of deployment scenarios to rehearse future operations. These might include blockades of many different variants of an invasion plans. Of course, China is also signaling strength to the new American administration in the hope that Trump will be scared off from any military confrontation with China, as he was with Russia. The latest surge of Chinese air and maritime power also demonstrates a degree of sophistication, because it is not easy to coordinate multiple naval deployments across such a large portion of the Earth's oceans. The Chinese are currently undertaking naval operations around Taiwan, in Australia's southern waters, and a few locations in between. This adds to a wide array of Chinese aggression towards Taiwan in recent weeks. Last week, the Chinese Ministry of Defense spokesman stated in a press briefing that, "We will come and get you, sooner or later. We make no promise to renounce the use of force, which is targeted at the Taiwan independence, separatist forces, and external interference. We warn the US side, playing sneaky tricks on Taiwan would only backfire." China has also continued its operations against international underwater cables in the vicinity of China. A Chinese freighter was caught cutting a Taiwanese undersea cable. The map from the Taiwan Security Monitor shows the number of incidents against these cables in recent years.
This strategic update was produced by the RUSI New South Wales Special Interest Group on Strategy. The SIG Strategy Group seeks to enhance knowledge of strategy, including the evolution of strategic thought, maintain awareness of current geostrategic issues, and undertake research on nominated issues of current strategic interest. Thank you.